from Sri Lanka and all over the world, from France, Paris, to another East Asia. First, I will spend about 20 minutes to introduce the situation of mainland China for a socialist Marxist viewpoint. I'm Lam. You can call me Lam. I'm a Hong Kong guy. I'm now is 56 years old. Now I'm independent Marxist activist, live in Hong Kong, and I'm a supporter of Asia Coming. Frankfurt interviews me to join the meeting to talk about the situation of mainland China. Although I'm living in Hong Kong, but in 1960 to 1919, I spent 6 years to mainland China to study university. And at the period, I joined the democracy student movement in 1986 and 1989. The late event is a much larger, span all over the China. After the Tiananmen massacre, I changed my ideology from Maoism to revolutionary, the basic principles of Trotskyism. So let's start for our introduction. Everyone must know China now is ruled by the same Communist Party in both Maoist and pro-Mao area. Its social nature and the caste nature of the state has changed since the late 1980s. For my view, it is from the form worker state, or you can say democratic socialism, to return to capitalism. But it is still a one-party dictatorship. The real change is in the Mao period, from the 1949 to 1980. You can say it is a one-party dictatorship, lack of workers' democracy and basic freedom. But at that time, at that period, China is end of capitalism. So the ruling elite is, you can say, it's a function of worker state. They are to stop the capitalists, but it is not no workers' democracy. But in 1980, late, it is changed. Under the Deng Xiaoping rules, the market economy, they call a socialist market economy, but it is nothing but an anti-scientific term. China was transformation to a function worker state by 1988 at the Nice, and developed into a capitalist state. And around 15 years before, it is from capitalist, underdevelopment capitalist to an imperial state. Some people think that the CCP regime is still a democratic worker state, because this is based on large of a still maintain a large scale of state-owned enterprise. This is not the truth. China, although they have a large scale of state-owned enterprise, but the state-owned enterprise is fully capitalist and fully marketization. When I am studied university in Guangzhou in 1986, I think at that time it's still a so-called worker state, because as a university student, I have free education, no any money to pay, and the free healthcare, free housing. But since 1990, everything is changed. You can say this from non-commercialization or de-commercialization to fully marketization, fully commercialization. So-called the rise of China does not change our judgment of the world capitalism as a whole. And this does not show the world as a new way that is different from capitalism. The so-called rise of China, everyone they say good is very one size and superficial. Yes, the GDP of China is the second only the US. But if you think every person to the GDP is not the good, is not the bottom high of the world, the rich and poor gap in mainland China has long surprised that the United States or another arranged capitalist country. So it is easy to say China wise is not for the good voice of workers' people in China. In fact, there is no democracy in China after the reform and open door policy. It is not mentioned socialism for equal for all, so that you can say the so-called socialism with Chinese characteristic, China model, or so-called Beijing consciousness are the facts only the O and D plus following the complementary monetary capitalism. As far the class nature of a state is concerned, China is not fundamentally different from the Western imperialist country. What is the difference of China between China and Western country? You can say China is a capitalism, democracy capitalism, or you can say state capitalism, or you can say one-party dictatorship capitalism. The model of this state capitalism is easier to the ruling elite to corruption of a state poverty on the one hand, and on the other hand, you can say it is a great degree of control over the economy than a Western classical type of neoliberalism. However, this model of state capitalism is only benefit of the ruling elite and the bourgeoisie, while its expulsion and oppression of the working mass is greater. Although the class nature, organization nature of worker struggle in China in last 10 years is slowed down under the CCP government's strong crackdown of the civil labor organization, poor workers lawyer, university student, and social workers NGO after 10 years before. Workers' collective action, for example, strike, have been completely slowed down. But it is not never. It is also have some increase in these 2 years. It is key that workers' protests are continuing under the fully dictatorship in China. But this struggle, because of the internet's control, this struggle and news control, this struggle are often confused of the single country, of a single factory that cannot be spread all the China. So the main reason of the workers' struggle and social movement includes why the workers' struggle and social movement is not very difficult in China. I think there's some reason. It is because there are still no major internal crisis in the CCP, in the ruling class. And the very strong state control includes internet control in mainland China. And the last one is the lack of experience of a real class struggle of the workers' mass. In any case, it is certain that China is no longer represent anti-imperialist force. Rather, it has become a powerful competitor to USA and Western Europe. The old imperial state is comparison. So China is not the solution of the crisis of world capitalism. It is a program. It's not the solution of program. It is one of the problem. Based on the above, we have some primary political conclusion. First one, we which against Trumpism. China is not a progressive alternative of US. And for another side, Western capitalist democracy is not a solution of a one-party state in mainland China. We oppose USA and Japan and South Korea to attack China. But China's so-called free trade rules are expose workers and the downside the natural in mainland China. So we are against Trumpism, communism. The real nice of division, the camp is which it has division of the workers' mass in China, in Hong Kong and US, and one hand. At the second hand, if bourgeoisie and the ruling release in both USA and mainland China. This is the first one. The second one is if China is not still a so-called worker state, it is one of the big power of imperial state. So we are against the Beijing government military pressure to Taiwan. We are against the war. We are favor to the right of people in Taiwan to self-determination. If it is united in mainland China and Taiwan, it just needs to carry out two sides of workers' people to agree with a peaceful negotiation. And there's both agree in both sides of people. one side is mainland China and another side is Taiwan. In the really, China long established return to capitalism. What China needs, for my view, or in a standpoint of revolutionary Marxism, China new is not only a political revolution, but a fundamental change in political side. Is from one-party state, net of democracy and basic freedom, towards the workers' democracy. We have a basic freedom, is one side. And another, we have a real transformation to social and economic development on the whole country. Now, China, it is the power of the capitalists in the democracy. So China have to reconstructualization of a planned economy from a no democracy planned economy to a planned democracy planned economy. So in short, in China, now is need a real social revolution, not only a political revolution. This our viewpoint. And in now, China, the left activities and the left some community, the main is some Maoists is they are nationalism. But now there is still some revolutionary Marxist youth in mainland China, but they are because a very dangerous situation. So they are not easier to open their platform and organization. There's underground. But I believe that after the crisis in mainland China is to develop, many people are no net of job. There's longer workers hour and lower pays. And the capitalist class have many money. So there's this inequality have lead many new generalization of people to think about what is to be done and what is the future of China and in East Asia or in whole the world. Is it the capitalist is the solution? Is it rise of China is the solution? Or the workers' mass, the workers' movement, and another social movement all over the world, includes Asia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, all the underclass united to fight for an equal world, for democracy in workplace is the solution. Maoists, they are not agree in workers' democracy. And they are many nationalization and believe that in Mao's area is a fully democracy. That is not true. I'm one of the Maoist believer in 1980, 55 years before. But after Tiananmen student movement, I changed I read some material of Chen Dushou, the founder of the China Communist Party, and later he is the leader of the China Trotsky movement. But his death in 1942. But there is some of the revolutionary tradition in mainland China. Thank you very much.
Representing from England, we invite you to share your opinion on China.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation. I'm a member of Workers' Power, which is the British section of the League for the Fifth International. We regard ourselves as orthodox Trotskyists. And perhaps not surprisingly, therefore, I would agree with quite a lot of what Comrade Lam Chidong said. Unfortunately, he seems to have left now because it's probably very late now in Hong Kong. But although he has said many things that I would agree with, I've been asked to give a Marxist analysis of China in 10 minutes, which is asking a lot. But what I would like to stress is the way in which the Maoist movement and the CCP in China took power and used power. And I base our analysis on the method that Trotsky developed in his analysis of Stalinism in The Revolution Betrayed. In that, Trotsky explained how the Communist Party of the Soviet Union had become the party of a bureaucratic caste, which controlled the entire Soviet Union economy on the basis of the planned economy that had, of course, initially been created after the Bolshevik Revolution. Using that analogy applied to China, I think we can see how in the mid-1930s, once Mao got control of the CCP after the Zunyi conference of 1935, I think, in the liberated zones controlled by the CCP, they established a system of administration and political control and military control, which was comparable to the control exercised by the Communist Party in the Soviet Union. Their strategy at that time for China was for a popular front, what they called a new democracy, in conjunction with Chiang Kai-shek. And this, of course, survived the war and so on. But Chiang Kai-shek turned against them, as we all know. But nonetheless, when the CCP took power in 1949, at the head of a huge army and already in control of half of China, he did enter into a popular front with the what were called the progressive element of the Kuomintang of Chiang Kai-shek's party. That arrangement only lasted about 3 years. After that, under the impact of the Korean War and the internal economic crisis in China, the CCP decided to expropriate what was left of capitalist property, which wasn't much in China, and they adopted the model of the Soviet Union, together with a great deal of aid from the Soviet Union, including planners to teach them how to run the economy. That was the basis upon which China became a degenerate workers' state, we would think. In other words, a society that was based on the property relations of a workers' state, planned property, foreign planning of the economy, monopoly of foreign trade, and so on. However, it was a degenerate workers' state because there was absolutely no control by the working class. There were no Soviets, there was no workers' militia, there was no control over the plan. The impossibility of developing socialism in one country, which is a characteristic, I would say, led almost immediately in the 1950s to an economic crisis. Mao Zedong tried to overcome that crisis by what he called the Great Leap Forward and the People's Communes. His opponents within the CCP, led by Liu Shaoqi, argued instead for market reforms to improve the development of light industry, whilst the CCP controlled heavy industry. That clash resulted in, as I think everyone knows, a huge famine in China. Something like 30 million died. As a result of that, Mao was pushed into the background and for several years had to accept that Liu Shaoqi, Deng Xiaoping, and a number of others had control. He fought back against that with the Cultural Revolution, in which he tried to mobilize, in particular, the students and the youth against his bureaucratic enemies. That ended, in the end, in stalemate. It got so out of control that the PLA under Lin Biao had to take control, restore martial law. In the 1970s, although order was restored, the economy declined even further. So that when Mao died and Zhou Enlai died, Deng Xiaoping very quickly reasserted his leadership of the CCP and began some market reforms, particularly in agriculture. There's not time to go into all of the measures undertaken, but the reform of agriculture and the return of the market did allow an increase in production and stimulated light industry in rural China. However, the main part of the industrial economy remained controlled by the state, remained a planned economy. However, the existence of an increasingly prosperous bourgeoisie stimulated further development, and comrades will be aware, I'm sure, that there was great unrest in the 1980s in China, sometimes called the Democracy Wall movement, which actually divided the leadership of the CCP, with people like Hu Yaobang siding with the democratic movement, whilst Deng Xiaoping was very much opposed. That resulted in the student democracy movement of 1989, which was, of course, crushed after Tiananmen and the crushing of strikes throughout China. However, although there was a period again of political stability, the economy got even worse. And in 1992, Deng Xiaoping decided that the only way in which the control of the bureaucracy could be maintained was by a planned deconstruction of planning and the reintroduction of the market. They didn't do that immediately, as in the Soviet Union. They planned it very, very carefully so that they retained control. But by 1995, they were ready to dismantle the planning ministries. And from then on, the state-owned industries were required to operate as independent corporations on market basis. And we mark that as the restoration of capitalism. So Lam thought it was 1989. We would argue that it was the dismantling of the plan which finally restored capitalism as a system in China. However, the bureaucracy remained in power and still does. And that is the big contradiction, we would say, in China, is between the continued political control and wealth of the bureaucratic caste whose party is called the Communist Party, a contradiction between them and the increasingly prosperous and powerful Chinese bourgeoisie that they brought back into existence. And that is a tension within China now, which I think is an important factor in the steady decline of the growth rate in China, even though after the financial crisis of 2008, because of the control and because of the extent of their international trade, China was able to pull itself out of the recession quite rapidly by a huge state-funded expansion. And I'm sure comrades are all aware of the huge expansion in high-speed railways, motorways, factories, hydroelectric dams, everything. However, that was all done on credit. And the current crisis that is developing in China is the consequence of an imbalance between basically the industrial production and consumer production, which remains low. That lies behind a steadily declining rate of growth in China and a developing political conflict within the CCP. And I think this is the important point, that within the CCP, there are now many people who are themselves capitalists. And this is beginning to break within the CCP, and I think is the key to understanding the political tensions. That is how we would understand the situation in China. I would agree with Lam that it is now an imperialist power. It is partly trying to overcome its problems by the export of capital and the traditional imperialist techniques, which I'm sure comrades are aware of. And I think that the task of revolutionaries in China is essentially an underground task, as Comrade Lam said, to develop a political program for the overthrow of capitalism in China on the basis of a transitional program. That, very much in a nutshell, is our understanding of China. Thank you very much for the opportunity to explain it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Max.